There always seems to be a friction with awareness. A kind of duality. Most, I think, obvious when there's a person and another person in a room doing a podcast. Now, Lex Fridman and Joe Rogan. Mr. Lex Fridman, Mr. Joe Rogan. They ask, and more often than not, a person asks a question. And person asks the question, thinks and responds. Awareness, from the perspective of Mr. Joe Rogan as an example, has dominance, asking the question, especially within his studio as further complexity now. Mr. Lex Fridman, who's visiting, as an example included, thinks and responds with dominance of intelligence and brilliance and genius, cognition, intellectual rigor. There's fatigue. There's sharing of awareness. And an example for how they're sharing awareness with non-duality rather than a duality in opponent versus an enemy. Him versus him. Now. Has to do with a ghost and an alien. Mr. Lex Fridman has awareness and participates in a podcast graciously and excitedly. With a friend of his, Mr. Joe Rogan. And Mr. Lex Fridman uses his awareness attention, concentration, and focus to make sure there's no ghosts walking through walls and bothering his friend, Mr. Joe Rogan. And Mr. Joe Rogan, who owns a studio for the podcast and carries keys to the front door, looks out and makes sure aliens don't interrupt their discussion and conversation. Each participant uses their awareness to benefit both of them, Mr. Lex Fridman, Mr. Joe Rogan, overall. And then safety and security are less of a distraction for awareness, thinking and speaking and having distraction in thoughts and distraction speaking and using attention and concentration and focus to coherently explain an important topic for conversation now. And possibly an alien and a ghost arrive. Both participants' awareness, attention, concentration, and focus are on two unidentified visitors to the studio where they're having their conversation now. And then a similar example with an alien and a ghost have to do with what two participants are already doing in their conversation. Curious, bored, possibly. And then eventually, when all of the awareness has calmed and relaxed, those four now participants examples in a room within a conversation and discussion learn, solve problems, and make decisions and continue their podcast in a studio now.